You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, I'm answering a question from Lungile in South Africa. How's it to my South Africans? So nice when I get emails from y'all. And this is about a 9-year-old girl who does really directive role play. In other words, Lungile's told exactly what to say and do, and it's very scripted. And so the questions are about that and how to remain CCPT when we don't really have the opportunities to reflectively respond like we normally would. So I will read parts of the email and then we'll dive in together. I'm currently working with a 9-year-old girl and have maintained a strictly CCPT approach through our 12 sessions. From the beginning, she has consistently engaged in teacher role play, taking on an authoritative position where she assigns me homework, disciplines me, and insists that I remain silent during much of the interaction. While I'm generally able to track the themes and emotional content, I've found it increasingly challenging to reflect feelings or content due to the restrictive nature of her play, particularly as she often demands compliance and/or silence. More recently, the play has shifted to a baking competition scenario, and she has cast me as the competition announcer and prescribes very specific lines for me to narrate, again limiting my verbal input to only what she directs. This has made it difficult to remain attuned in the traditional CCPT sense, especially in terms of reflecting affect and supporting her emotional processing. I'd be very grateful for your thoughts on how to stay within the framework while navigating highly structured directive play where the child limits therapeutic dialogue. All right, this is an interesting scenario. I love the idea of a baking competition, by the way. How fun. I think that in general, we have to redefine expectations of what, quote, has to take place, end quote, in a CCPT session. So, Lungile, I think my immediate response is that if you are preserving relationship, if you are following directives and cues, and if you are reflectively responding when you can, in other words, there will be times in a session where she does not insist that you only say or do a certain thing. Then you know that you are fulfilling the model, you know that this is meaningful therapeutic work for her, and you know that she is self-actualizing. And therefore, the pressure is off a little bit. We don't have to feel so consumed with the notion of, I have to get feeling reflections in, I have to get reflection of content in, I have to be able to track behavior. Those are ways of engaging so that the child feels seen and heard and understood and valued. You're doing that by the role play. She's invited you into the play. It becomes collaborative when a child invites us in. That's a meaningful moment in and of itself. So the fact that every single week she has you take a role, we know that that means relationship and rapport have been established. That said, we're going to follow the directives and cues that we're given, and we trust that the fact that she has dictatorial power right now, she needs it. And part of a child demanding that we don't talk or that we only say certain things or we have to play a role or we have very explicit instructions, that's all her need for power and control. We know that will naturally shift. She's on one end of the pendulum right now. She will naturally give you some more power and control back at some point in the process. She's just not there yet. Because remember, the pendulum serves as the antidote in a child's mind. In other words, she feels powerless and out of control in every other scenario. So when she comes in the playroom, okay, I'm going to take every bit of it I can get. But she can't sustain that and she won't sustain that. It will naturally start to shift back toward more balance. She's just not there yet. You're only 12 sessions in. So I do have a couple of thoughts, though, on how to navigate that. When you are being assigned homework, when you're being disciplined, when you can't say anything, often what you can comment is about the fact that you're not allowed to talk. That usually will give you a little bit of leeway. In other words, if they say, you're not allowed to say anything, your response should probably be, instead of, you don't want me to say anything, because that's actually saying something. That's reflecting content. if you say, "Oh, I'm not allowed to say anything," and you say it as if it's your experience, you say it as if you're lamenting as the student would be with a dictatorial teacher, a student would be frustrated by being told they can't say anything. A student would be frustrated that they're being given homework. A student would be frustrated they're getting disciplined. So your responses can actually come as part of your role. Like, man, everything I do, I get in trouble. That usually is well received by a child because it seems like you are continuing the role. Now, if she continues to say, "You are only allowed to say what I'm allowing you to say," then you're going to say, "Oh, I can only say what you want me to say." And then you just follow the lead. You know that it won't last forever. But often you can get the workaround where you're including it in the role that you're playing. As far as the baking competition, okay, so she has you now as the announcer. Well, you certainly have leeway with that too. So you can use the lines that she gives you. And now so-and-so is going to make a lemon cream cake, whatever you're being told to say. But then as an announcer, I mean, think about someone who provides commentary on shows. There's some ad lib and there's some dialogue that kind of has that color commentary. So you might say, "Ooh, this is exciting. So-and-so's coming up with their cake." And you're still getting feeling reflections in. You're still getting tracking of behavior in. So you just kind of have to think about it as a little bit of a different approach. You are still engaging in those reflective responses. It's just through a little bit of a roundabout way. And keep in mind, when we think about the reflective responses, they are a tool. They're not a requirement. It is the way that we help a child feel that we're present with them, we're engaged, and that they've experienced the be with attitudes. When you're in a role play scenario, they're naturally experiencing that because they've engaged you in play. And as long as you're not completely checked out and saying nothing, they know that you are with them. They know that you are present and attuned to what's going on because you're part of their story. You're part of their dialogue. And therefore, when we have that kind of investment, we don't have to be so diligent about getting those reflective responses in. Now, obviously, if we can get a choice in there, if we can get a feeling reflection in there, if we can get an encouragement phrase in there, we're going to. And there will usually be times that will make sense. In other words, during a transition point, for example, maybe she goes, "Okay, now we're going to." So now we're no longer in role play scenario. She's in transition. That's when you can work in some of the traditional skills. But keep in mind, you can always work in the skills as part of the role as well. You work it into the dialogue of the character that you're playing. And that's a little bit of a ninja trick or a hack, if you will. All right. So Lungie, thank you so much for the question. I hope that that's helpful. Role play is a lot of fun, but it can be tricky because we kind of have to walk the line of remaining adherent to the model while recognizing that there are going to be things that are a little bit harder to do. It's harder to reflectively respond when we're given a script. It's harder to take notes when we're sword fighting the entire session. It's harder to provide encouragement phrases and choices when we're being the mom and we're doing a role play of relational play in the house. So it's just about finding balance. It's never about one or the other. It's kind of integrating both sides. I can be fully engaged in a role as well as work in the therapeutic skills as part of that. So hope that encourages y'all. I love you. Thanks for hanging out. If you want to email me, I'd love to hear from you. Brenna at thekidcounselor.com. If you want to leave a question for me on my voicemail in the States, 813-812-5525. We will talk again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.